And we are connecting. Let's get some Benny Goodman going here.
Here's Benny Goodman's theme, Let's Dance.
All right. And here's Miles, right on schedule. There's my boy.
How do you do? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The National Broadcasting Company presents Coast to Coast, the king himself, Benny Goodman, and his orchestra.
See, Benny Goodman is the king himself.
Tonight from the Panther Room of Hotel Sherman's College Inn in downtown Chicago's
It's coming to you live from the College Inn at the Hotel Sherman, right where the Google building's about to be.
Benny Goodman's music.
Clark and Randolph. Hey, Martin. Evening, everybody. Get ready for a virtual boat tour starting in about 10 minutes. Miles. Miles is making his appearance. Hey, Cindy, Octavio, and Karen. Why so blue that we go with kind of a nautical theme tonight? This cat just cannot resist a keyboard. Hey, Don. Hey, Laura. Hey, Marie. Thanks for the Blue Sky shout out. Blueski. This is a different Benny. This is live from the Hotel Sherman. The College Inn was down in the basement, I believe. Still survives as a brand of chicken broth. Miles, why are you shedding? It's still winter. That's right, Enchantment Under the Sea. Hey, Gladys. Hey, Chris. Miles, be careful, okay? Miles. Hey, Bridget and Mary Jo. Hey, Heather. Hey, Dad. Hey, everybody. Hey, you guys. I was just watching old Electric Company Spider-Mans earlier. It's a fun thing about the internet. You get like a weird Electric Company sketch that you saw once in 1984 stuck in your head. And you can find it. Miles. Miles. Oh, no. That's not good. Hey, Kirk in Minneapolis. Yeah, warm-up is coming, they say. Miles, this face you make. Hey, Wisp and Brandy. Glad that we still got you here, even if you're dumping meta. I get it. Hey, Evelyn. Ahoy and avast, ye Schwabs.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to bring Tommy Taylor to the microphone now to sing the currently popular ballad, Time Was. Tommy?
Hey, Julius. Come bathe in the river. Well, not dangerous at all. Switching between off-brand La Croix. Hey, Alan, Milwaukee. It is International Pet Day. We've been treating Miles very well. Look at this guy. Evening, Timothy and Timberly. Hey, Maureen.
Dreaming the time away.
Yes, I know you cannot plug your phone into charge on the boat tour. People try to do that a lot. Hey, Mary. Susan, don't worry. We're a ways from starting yet. Miles! I got my business Skeletor outfit on tonight. Hey, Tom. Hey, Valerie. Okay, now, Miles, this tour is kind of hard. So here, why don't you set up down here? Look. We'll just set up the red light. See, there it goes. You see it? No. Hey, Georgina. And Georgia. There we go. Hey, Claudel. Evening, everybody. Chris, yes, this is my business Skeletor attire. Remember, despair is compliance. Until we meet again. Hey, Beth. Hey, Janice and Gerald and Jill. Evening, everybody. Been a while since I did a boat tour. I hope I remember everything okay. So when I did it enough times that I feel like I got it all in my head. It's muscle memory for the most part, other than the occasional new bits. Me and hockey. And hey, Ash. I have not been hot lately in my place. Evening, Keely.
Something special this evening, a little tune written by Brother B.G. himself. It's a clarinet a la
Hey,
King.
Dirk.
Benny Goodman.
In Mendon, Michigan. All right. Welcome along. Italian ice with vodka. That sounds good. I am having a peanut butter old-fashioned myself. Switching back and forth between that and off-brand LaCroix. Miles. I can hear him out here making his danger chirps at the red light that is set on an auto move. Hey, Katie. Evening, Grandma Bell. Hey, Bob. Hot tea. Good pick. Evening, Kristen. Hey, Mary. Eileen. Hey, everybody. Welcome along. Pepsi, good choice. The choice of a new generation. Vicky Lily is very well. Spends most of her time cuddled up next to Ronnie. Robin isn't on the boat. I might be missing something there. Hey, Scott. Hey, Southside Johnny. Don't want to go home, huh? Hey, Carolyn, Arizona. Okay, I should stop torturing Miles anyway. He's still out there just chirping at the thing. Paula, that's the auto cat laser. Remember when laser pointers cost like $300? And then it turned out they're really only useful as cat toys. See also AI. I've been experimenting with AI programs just so I can talk about them more intelligently, and generally I found it's like the max power way. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the max power way, which is the same thing as the wrong way, but faster. Anything I do that I try to do to plug in AI, it goes very fast, but it doesn't work reliably. Hey Eleanor, hey Floricida, hey Pat. My AI personal assistant is lots of fun to talk to, but a terrible personal assistant. It's like talking to Johnny Five.
There, ladies and gentlemen, you had a Benny Goodman concerto called Clarinet a la King, and now we'd like to bring to our microphone lovely Helen Forrest, who sings a smoothie called Soft as Spring.
Here's a smoothie called Soft as Spring that we'll do right before we'll let Benny Goodman go through right before the tour begins. Really do better warm-ups for this, like lemon face, lion face, lemon face, lion face. Evening, Robert. Hey, Heather. Hey, Irene. No rapid, unscheduled disassemble, Johnny Five. There's a couple of things AI can't do. One is fact check. I asked ChatGPT to give me a biography of H.H. Holmes, and let's just say they're apparently not using my book to train it. And also, it can't really do humor, at least not intentionally. Unintentionally, it can be very funny. But in kind of like a Johnny Five kind of way. Hey Martin, yeah, I'm thinking of joining may have to join the Royal Canadian Kilted Axemen. Fun fact, to start singing that song in a bar full of Xennials, people will join in. Johan, I have not heard any update on the book about you in some time. I'm half tempted to just pull it from that publisher or something. I don't know. Well, Octavio, we all know the Stonecutters made Steve Gutenberg a star. That's one of those conspiracy theories I kind of believe. We're going to let Benny Goodman finish up this tune, then we will start the boat tour. This is a different Benny Goodman than normal. This is coming to you from the Hotel Sherman, the College Inn, down in the basement of the Hotel Sherman, right where the Thompson Center was until just recently. It's soon to be the new Google building. Charming.
Coast to Coast, the National Broadcasting Company presents the music of the king himself, Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the far-famed Panther Room of Hotel Sherman's College Inn in downtown Chicago. Something now in the Latin manner, Helen Forrest sings Perfidia.
All right, so that's Benny wrapping it up for tonight. That means it's time for us to get started properly. So, welcome along, everybody. I am Business Skeletor, also known as Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. See? There. All right. So I've been a tour guide and historian for 20 years here in Chicago. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, Ghosts of Chicago, now in the 10th anniversary edition, and a couple others that I hadn't added into this deck. Graceland Cemetery, the book, Graceland Cemetery Volume 2 is coming. Lots and lots of interesting stuff. Murder Maps USA. Lots of cool stuff. There's a brand new book Do I have a copy of that around here where I can easily show it off? I do not. Prepared, I'm not. So the new book is called, Graveyards of Trinity Church in St. Paul's, which is a New York cemetery book. Came out about 6 weeks ago through Arcadia Press. Available wherever hardware is sold in Manhattan. So, all right, everybody. What we're going to do today is a virtual boat tour. I spent a couple of years running regular boat tours in 2016 and 2017. That's been a few years ago now, so some things have changed a little bit. I don't have quite the muscle memory I used to. These days, I mostly just do 1 or 2 boat tours a year, but doing it like this keeps me in practice, and it saves you an awful lot of money on tickets. It saves you money on parking. It saves you money on drinks because you can just have your drinks at home, drink Pepsi, drink water, drink nothing at all, whatever you feel like. But welcome along, everybody. I hope everybody did take their virtual Dramamine, but we'll try to keep things steady. I did use a Steadicam while we were filming. So, without further ado, we take a deep breath. This is a difficult one. There. All right, so here we are in DuSable Harbor, named after Chicago's first non-native settler, a guy by the name of Jean-Baptiste Pointe-DuSable, who came to this area back in about the 1770s. It would have been a few blocks further west than we are right now. This area was all still just water at the time. But he lived here for a while, left apparently because he was mad that the Potawatomi would not make him chief. This might be what he looked like. We really don't know. There's only a couple of paragraphs where the primary sources about Jean-Baptiste Pointe-DuSable, our first non-native settler. He's thought to have been a fur trader from Haiti, but there are those who say he might have been running away from slavery down south, or even a pirate on the run from the Caribbean. That theory has gone around a little bit. But he moved on, his place was taken by others, and over the course of the next 250 years or so, we created this here in Chicago. Now, we're going through DuSable Harbor right now. We officially became a city back in 1834, officially a city in 1838, officially a town in 1834. If there's anybody from out of town here, great. I know we got people from Canada. I know we have got people from Arizona. I know we got people from Detroit and Milwaukee right here. But, you know, I love showing off how awesome this city is to people from out of town. Of course, Chicago has had its share of visitors. As early as the 1700s, the French missionaries and explorers were passing through here to trade with the Native Americans. In those days, this area was called Chicagua, which is Potawatomi for place by the water that smells like an onion. Or at least we flatter ourselves that such is the case. The Potawatomi word for onion was about the same as the Potawatomi word for skunk, and both of those words were just used to indicate strong odors. So it could have been, I know a guy who actually literally translates this as shit creek occasionally. And it works. So the land you see here was all still water in those days. It started to change in the 1880s. A guy named Captain George Wellington Streeter crashed his houseboat onto the shore, started charging people money to dump their garbage around his ship. And eventually he created this 186-acre landfill. The city let it happen because they were filling it in anyway, but he forged some papers, claimed that not only did he own this new land he had created, but that it was his own independent country, of which he was the emperor. So we don't have any kings in this country, but we did have an emperor for a while there. It took the cops 30 years to get rid of this guy. It wasn't just legal wranglings. He had a whole army of hobos that he'd allowed to emigrate to his new country. Finally, after 30 years, he lost the Battle of Garbage Hill. Ended up spending the last couple of years of his life selling coffee at what is now Navy Pier. But right on the other side of these buildings that you can see right behind me, that we'll see again later on, there is now a statue of Captain George Wellington Streeter. That's how we treat our criminals and pirates here in Chicago. We make statues out of them. We put their names on buildings in giant letters. So, by the time he crashed ashore here in 1888, Chicago had about 1 million people. Then it went from having a few thousand in the 1830s up to about 1 million, all in the space of a generation and a half. It took ancient Rome 800 years to get to 1 million people. It took London over 1,000 years to get to 1 million people. Chicago did it in like a generation and a half. So With all of that rapid expansion, you'd think we would be the birthplace of the skyscraper, and we are, but it's not as logical if you look at the soil around here. It's a very wet, marshy soil. In the old days, buildings were a lot heavier. Like you can still see buildings that kind of taper out, down, or flare out down at the bottom. Like the Monadnock building, the walls at the bottom are about 6 feet thick, holding up the rest of the building. You get a building like this higher than 7 or 8 floors, it will start to sink into that wet, marshy soil. But the architect William LeBaron Jenney came up with a way around this. He developed what we call steel frame construction. That's where you build just a skeleton for the building out of steel, then everything else, all of the stone, all of the glass, all of the masonry just gets draped over it like a curtain. Made for much lighter buildings and allowed him to build the first modern skyscraper anywhere. This one, the Home Insurance Building back in the 1870s. That one is no longer with us. They tore it down in the 30s, or depending on who you believe, perhaps in 1906 it was destroyed by dinosaurs, as the Chicago Tribune said one grim April Fool's Day. I wouldn't blame them. Reading the news these days. So, making our way underneath here, underneath the bridge. So we're getting into the area now that was once known as the Sands over on the right-hand side. We're getting about to the area where the beach used to be. Not quite to the land yet, but this was the home of a bunch of resorts, as they were called, that the Chicago Tribune described as not ornamental to our morals. Eventually, Long John Wentworth, our mayor at the time, just bought up all of the buildings and tore them all down. But coming in now, we have got really every kind of architecture you can see right here. Like all around here, you can see examples of modernism, these very plain black rectangle type buildings. Then right underneath me here, you can see a bit of the London Guarantee Building, which is part of the Beaux-Arts style of architecture with a lot of columns, Greek Revival elements, the kind that were popular back in the up until about the 1910s, 1920s. Here you've got some of the International School by Nathalie Delbois, the Equity Building. And also there are little examples all over, such as to the left is 333 North Michigan. This is an example of the Art Deco style with its streamlined verticality and clean lines, the architecture of the Jazz Age. But all of this is relatively recent. For the longest time, this was still really the beach. North Michigan Avenue above the river wasn't even called Michigan Avenue for the longest time. It was Pine Street. But after they got rid of Captain Streeter, after they built the Michigan Avenue Bridge, everybody knew that this was going to become the Magnificent Mile. So this first building here on the left with a clock tower designed to look like a cathedral in Seville, Spain, the Wrigley Building. This was going to be the anchor of the Magnificent Mile by Graham Anderson, Probst, and White. But for William Wrigley Jr., the same guy whose name is on Wrigley Field, it wasn't just his gum that made him rich, it was his advertising. So everybody assumed that he was going to have a massive Wrigley sign right on this thing, and we loved it when he announced that he wasn't going to do that. He said, no, I just want the most beautiful office building in the world. No advertisement, just a small plaque that says Wrigley Building, nothing more. And we absolutely loved him for it. Al Chase wrote this article praising William Wrigley Jr. to the sky for not putting his name on the building in giant letters like some hoodlum who was probably compensating for something. Speaking of, I wonder why that drugged-up Nazi Nepo baby that keeps going on television lately hasn't built a tower with his name on it. Credible rumors indicate that he has a botched penis implant. You could just build yourself a skyscraper. But in any case, moving right along. So this is 401 North Wabash by Adrian Smith. Built to align with the other buildings nearby with contextualism, a way that architects can kind of collude with the built environment. This first setback right underneath me right now is set at the same height as the setback on the Wrigley Building. Now, following up above, all 93 felony counts high, that second setback there is set at the same height as the next building that is coming up here, this black one. And the setback on the left aligns with these corncob buildings here. It makes all of the buildings look as though they belong together, which is a very difficult thing to do, but the architect Adrian Smith at 401 North Wabash is a very clever architect. Now, just beyond that, the plain black one coming up, well, actually, we'll match this up here. You can see where all the setbacks line up. Very cool way of doing it. Just beyond that, the very plain black one, originally the IBM building, it's now the AMA building, by the architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who was this is the ultimate example of modernism. That was very much his style, very plain black boxes that emphasized the simple beauty of the raw materials. He came from Germany between the wars, trying to make as much building as you could with as little materials as you could just made sense. When other architects were still putting statues on things, he would hold up a brick and say, "Behold the brick. The brick is truly something." Only in a much thicker German accent than I can possibly get away with. One of his students was Bertrand Goldberg, who designed these corncob-looking buildings, believed in a lot of the tenets of modernism, but not all the rectangles. Obviously. He's often quoted as saying there are no right angles in nature, so there shouldn't be any in architecture either, which I don't know if he really said that or not. There are plenty of Goldberg buildings that do, in fact, have right angles, but he was really kind of not just an architect so much as a utopian idealist. Now, he wanted to draw people back downtown with these by adding things like parking spaces. But this was not just apartments. This was a city within a city. Everything you needed. There was a grocery store in there. There were offices. There was a bowling alley even. For those were bowling days, and most men bowled hard. Now, they were built to be the most modern buildings in the world. They still look very modern now. I still think they look fantastic. I don't know if I keep hearing that cell phone usage is not great in there. Now, they're sometimes considered brutalism. They're kind of too pretty to be brutalism, too elegant. Brutalism is brute meaning raw, the style of the 60s, thinking like giant parking garages and university buildings from the 60s, or 55 Wacker here by Otto Stark. The old, we call it the hashtag building sometimes, or the pound sign building, depending on how old you are. Otto Stark, who actually lives like right over there on the next building over from here. Every time I see him, I'm like, "Hi, Mr. Stark," just because I want to be more like Spider-Man. The corn cobs are actually officially known as Marina City. We'll go underneath the Clark Street Bridge here just briefly. I just saw some places online. Marina City does have some condos. It's gone condo now, but they're on sale, and they're fairly affordable, really. I'm going to guess the HOA fees aren't great. Coming up here about the only example we see of the Prairie School of Architecture on the Chicago River Tour. This is the Reed Murdoch building from 1913. One thing Prairie School architects was like to do was having some little thing that indicated what went on inside the building. So you can kind of see that. If you look closely between the windows, there are these little like Art Deco representations, looking forward to Art Deco, of wheat shafts. Because this was a grocery warehouse when they built it. Now, the clock tower is a little off-center. They had to lop off part of it when they added the LaSalle Street Bridge. There didn't used to be a bridge there. There used to be a tunnel underneath the river. Here's a diagram of it. It became a death trap during the Great Chicago Fire. And the tunnel is still there. It's been full of damp sand since the 1950s, but it's hard to get rid of a tunnel. Coming up next to me is the closest we see to an example of the Chicago School of Architecture, which was kind of simultaneous with Prairie School in the early 20th century, has a base, a shaft, and a capital. Also sometimes called the Commercial School. This is the old coffee warehouse designed by Lars Hallberg. It actually says the Chicago School right on it, in case I forget what architectural style this is. But it refers to like the Chicago School of Psychiatry that's on the inside. Everybody get ready to duck under this one. No, Miles, duck, don't climb. All right, the Merchandise Mart, 1930 by Graham Anderson, Probst, and White, the wholesale showroom for the Marshall Field Company, who actually made a lot more of their money on wholesale than they did off of the retail store. The retail store was kind of a loss leader for them. But this was supposed to be where all the traveling salesmen, all the country stores would come and see all the stuff they could get on wholesale to sell in their own stores. Outside of it, the Pez Dispenser Hall of Fame. Guys like Marshall Field himself. I used to think Samuel Kresge was up there. I wish you could get him to like go, "Attention Kmart shoppers. Blue light special on underpants in aisle 3. Now, these are giants of merchandising. The Field Company only owned it for a couple of years. The Great Depression hit. They ended up selling it to Joseph Kennedy of the Kennedy family. And the Kennedy family still owns some of the land around here. Since this footage was filmed a couple of years ago, they finished a couple more buildings here on what was called the Wolf Point Towers. There are 3 Wolf Point Towers. They got 2 of them up as of the time this was filmed. This is Wolf Point East, Wolf Point South was still being built. Wolf Point West is over there. These were luxury condos. Last I checked, it was like $8,000 a month for a 2-bedroom. But I love that they're calling them the Wolf Point Towers. Wolf Point is what the early people called this little section of the land where the two branches of river come together. Exactly why it was called Wolf Point is kind of lost to history. There's some vague stories about people named Wolf who were here, or possibly just that there were so many wolves in the environment. They used to have a thing every year. They would shut down all the businesses so everybody could help chase wolves out of the woods and into the ice on the lake. It's a holiday not unlike Whacking Day or Weasel Stomping Day. This was also, this was downtown to the early settlers here when Chicago was first growing. And downtown at the time meant a couple of log cabins. On the other side of the river, was the Sauganash Hotel, where Mark Bobine would keep the tavern like hell and play the fiddle like the devil. Now, directly in front of us, you can see this pink building coming up. This is about the oldest building that we see on a Chicago river tour. It's from the early 20th century. It used to be the North American Cold Storage Warehouse. This comes from back before the days. It's been very recent in history, if you think about it. We've been able to turn water into ice anytime we felt like it. Of course, this time of year, for real, you can just kind of go outside. In those days, to try to keep things cool in there, the walls were about 3 feet thick. You can see that in some of the cutouts. The walls were stuffed with frozen cork and frozen horsehair, and some kind of a brine that was going through as a coolant, some kind of ammonia brine. Now, eventually, Harry Weiss, the architect, wanted to turn this into condos and lofts. It would have been an awful lot easier just to tear the building down, but Harry Weiss was a very preservation-minded architect, so he hauled away like dozens of train cars worth of frozen horsehair, cut out all of the windows, added architectural bracing to keep it standing, turned it pink. Would have been a lot easier just to tear it down, probably a lot more cost-effective, but from an environmental standpoint, the greenest building is one that is already standing. So, all right, we've just passed the 20-year anniversary, a very important 20-year anniversary here. Coming up ahead of us, it's kind of a solemn thing. Well, for one thing, we've got the Great Chicago Flood of 1992 that began at this site when some of these pilings got jammed too far into the riverbed and busted right into the old freight tunnels 40 feet below. But also in 2004, the Dave Matthews Band's tour bus parked right here let all of the sewage off onto a tour boat that was passing below. Moment of silence, please. Crash into me. Oh, crash into my head. All right, the great shittening of Chicago, correct. Let's spin this boat around. We'll come at it from the other angle now. Now, I just attended a lecture about the flood of 1992. They talked about, he actually had pictures of the mattresses that they were throwing down into the whirlpool to try to stop up the plug in the tunnels. What they eventually did to stop it was they found some company that made a custom balloon to fill up the tunnels. And I just couldn't get my head around that. Like, did you check the yellow pages under balloons? You'd end up at that clown shop at Grand and Halstead or something. But it turned out there was a company that built an actual model of the tunnel, then built a custom balloon to fill it up. And it's like, were these guys just waiting around for their time to shine? Is there really that much use for a custom balloon company like this? Or is it kind of suspicious that suddenly you need a custom balloon in the shape of the freight tunnels and these guys just conveniently show up? All right. Once again, on the right, besides just its preservation work, Harry Weiss also designed the river cottages here, these 4 cool townhouses. A couple of them have come back on the market since 1990 when they were first built. Up until a few years ago, they were all still owned by the original owners. They're very postmodern on the inside, very Pee-wee's Playhouse in vibe. It was 1990. We were all watching Pee-wee's Playhouse and influenced by that Memphis design style, which incidentally was not named after Memphis the city, as when the designers got together to formulate it, they were listening to the song Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues again. Now coming up here, the River Bend building. Now this is mansionettes down below, condos up top. That middle section there is a parking garage. But it's so narrow you can't really turn your cars around, so there's an elevator that brings the cars to the different level. It's all valet, so the people who live in the building are only vaguely aware that that's even a thing. But car elevators are something we've been experimenting with in Chicago since the 1920s. We're trying to cram an awful lot of stuff into a really small space here. Like, within a 1 mile radius of here, part of which is the lake, we've got the whole population of Wyoming. You get that many people together, where do you put them? Where do you keep their stuff? How do you make things look attractive? And you can see sometimes we just kind of have to mix it all together. Like these porthole looking things are actually vents letting out the exhaust fumes from the train tracks that are hidden back behind the building. But they also match it up visually with the river cottages and also with some of the circles on the other side too. We do have to get creative. In fact, you see this building on the right, the warehouse-looking building, was the building that ships would have passed for the longest time, until finally Getch Partners figured out a way that they could make use of the very small space next to it with what is called a core-supported structure. Here at 155 North Riverside, this building looks like it's got a wedge chopped out of it. To what is known as a core-supported structure, it rises up until it's out of everything's way, then flares outward, creating this kind of V-shaped building. Look at underneath the bridge here. It's one of the louder bridges right here on Lake Street. Not as loud as the Washington one for some reason. But core-supported structures were not new. Harry Weiss built one back in the 70s. But looking all the way up here, you don't usually see them going up 700 feet like this. Now, you might have heard that tall buildings are known to sway in the wind a little bit. Really, officially, they give, not sway, but to a layman, that means the same thing. So to keep this one steady, there's a kind of a trend for what they call liquid-tuned mass dampers, or slosh dampers. It's a giant tank of water on top so that when the wind blows one way, the water will flow the other, keeping everything steady. Brilliant engineering, but, if you think about it, it's really just like the kind of, such simple physics is like something the ancient Romans might have done. If the ancient Romans were building 700-foot tall core-supported structures, which they were not, and there's my reference to the Roman Empire for the day. On the left, I just want to point out 110 North Wacker. We'll talk about that one a little bit later, because the camera went over to the Boeing building over here, or whatever this is going to be now that Boeing is moving out. It's just a fun name to say. Nobody actually likes boing, but it's nice to have large businesses in the city. Now this one is what is built on what's called land rights, air rights. A lot of these buildings are built over railroad tracks. In the 1920s, the railroads figured out they could sell the air over the tracks for people to build on. You just had to somehow still have the building be structurally sound, which was difficult here because it goes over the part where the tracks cross over each other. Here we go under the Washington Boulevard Bridge. This was not named after George Washington. It was actually named after Frederick Boom Boom Washington of the Sweat Hogs. Hi there. And if you don't believe that, then up your nose with a rubber hose. I am too young for that reference. Hullibert and Root, the rock stars of Art Deco, the architecture of the Jazz Age, built this cubist version of a sphinx known as the Daily News Building in the 1920s. Now, the plaza out front was a very new idea for a big public building like this, and kind of a surprise at the time, too, as this was a much rougher area. Terrific novel, Knock on Any Door, the origin of the phrase, live fast, die young, have a good-looking corpse, by Willard Motley. Every other page in that book, somebody is getting mugged in that plaza. Fantastic book, though. Go underneath the Lyric Opera Bridge. Everybody probably ought to duck under this one. Please do not reach up and try to touch the bridge. They never clean the underside of these things. We'll get into some modernism here. With Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, who were so devoted to Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's ideas that Frank Lloyd Wright used to call them the Three Blind Mice. That's just kind of Frank being Frank. He never said anything nice about pretty much anyone. But these were very much in Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's style. In a good Mies building, you can never see the seams. You can never see the screws. He used to say, God is in the details. Now, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill just recently have been making some more interesting buildings, like 800 Fulton is a really interesting one. Well, you can kind of track the progress. Eventually, they moved on to Gateway 3, which moved away from black boxes and switched to white boxes, which for them was quite a switch. And then beyond that, the bending glass of Gateway 4. This was a long project. Gateway 1, Gateway 2, Gateway 3, and Gateway 4 went from like the 1970s all the way to the 1990s. So the process of this, you can see just kind of the growth of architecture from modernism to very early postmodernism. Now, after modernism, you get to postmodernism, which is really just architecture of school that you make up as you go along. Anytime you see a building and don't know quite how to call it, you can just say, how postmodern. You'll probably be right. Here's Adam Street, named after me. Though the apostrophe was on the other side lately. Another one that kind of crammed in between Gateway 3 and Gateway 4 is this building described by the Tribune when it opened as like a small black box heavily strapped with steel cables, as if we were holding in something volatile, something that had to be contained or else it would explode. Which is a great example of I love that description. This did used to be a trading floor too, where people would like yell and scream at each other over oat, corn, and barley deals. It's kind of a small version of the Hancock building. And coming up here, this is another building that used to be referred to as the dullest building in the city. Conspicuously dull is how the Chicago Reader described it. There was just this beige slab over the elevator shaft at one point. Beyond that, it's like a Mies building, only you can see all the seams. You can see all of the screws. So eventually they decided they were tired of being conspicuously dull and decided to add this design element over the elevator shaft. And what this design is a map of the Chicago River with the red dot being the "You Are Here" portion. So we can kind of track the whole route of the tour on the building. And just adding that in made this a much more desirable building for people. Almost overnight. And there's a quick view of Gateway 4. And by Graham Anderson, Probes and White, the same year that they did the Merchandise Mart, they also did the old post office. And we shall swing around from here, passing the Roosevelt Collection, which is a combination movie theater, mall shop, and apartment building, which has kind of been the trend lately. You get these like movie theaters plus mall shops, like there'll be an H&M, Claire's probably, whatever's at the mall these days. And never is Spencer Gifts, but that and apartments. I really think that they're going to eventually turn a lot of the old dead malls into like Gen X housing, which really brings us like into the future. Like in the 70s and 80s, every children's sci-fi book that took place in the future, people lived at the mall in the future. So the future is now. Over to the left, a couple of blocks over would have been Mrs. O'Leary's cottage and barn where the Great Chicago Fire began. To this day, we don't really know what started that fire, but it burned from here to across the river, then all the way up north, all the way to Lincoln Park, about 3 miles north of here, burning up everything in its path, about 16,000 buildings. We had to rebuild, but we did. Coming up directly ahead of us is one of the last great brutalist buildings. Though all of a sudden, like even before the movie, brutalism was suddenly popular again. No one knows why, but all of a sudden you can unironically claim to like brutalism again, after it being the butt of every architecture joke for a generation or so. But this is another Bertrand Goldberg building. You might remember him from the Marina City buildings back there. But this is the River City building. They do, in fact, have trouble right here in River City. That's trouble with a capital T, and that rhymes with C, and that stands for cell phone coverage. But this is another building that he built to be like a city within a city. It's a marina for everybody's boats. La-di-da. There is also apartments. There's a doctor's office in there. There's a grocery store that's about 50% booze. There's a preschool in there right across the hall from the grocery store that's about 50% booze. And there's the Summer of George that we've done this tour on a couple of times. They've now got a new boat called the Festivus that we didn't work on more because we don't have the duck on that one. That's because I always forget the duck. Now, directly in front of us here, you can see this one with all of the balconies there over onto the right. That is 123 Van Buren, or 225 Van Buren, by Ralph Johnson, the architect, which we sometimes call that the Morse code building, as the balconies there really do look like the dots and dashes of Morse code. Now, on beyond here, you can also see just a little bit of the Board of Trade building, the back of it, topped by Ceres, a statue of the Roman goddess of grains and agriculture. I love this one. This is our best example of Art Deco in the city for my money. Built by Holabird and Root in 1930, who were the rock stars of Art Deco in that era. Now, Ceres, of course, does not have a face. There's some urban legends about that the John Story thought they'd never build another building this tall, so it didn't matter if it had a face. Really, it's more of an Art Deco thing. He did point out that not many people were going to be able to see the face anyway. But he wasn't a fool. They were already building much taller buildings than this in New York at the time. But that is the Board of Trade. And then the Datsun dashes. And just ahead of us here, we can see the one we sometimes call the world's largest White Castle. This is 321 Wacker, 311 South Wacker, which is, there's a lot of urban legends about the shape of this one too, like they say it's supposed to be based on somebody's engagement ring or something. Really, it is a postmodern, new for the 90s take on the design of the Chicago Tribune Tower from the 1990s. One thing postmodern architects really liked to do was take an old style like Art Deco or Gothic, as in the case below us, and update that for the 1990s. At the time that one was built, it was the tallest building in the world that didn't have a name. It was like 990 feet tall, but only known by its address. But nowadays, that record is long gone now. It's such a trend to build buildings without actual names, just addresses now. Which, for the purpose of like fighting fires and having the fire department show up on time, probably makes sense and all. But I kind of want that one back. The building that broke that record was 432 Park in New York. This horribly designed building that everybody hates, especially the people who live in it. It just looks like a cigarette that you could kind of flick out and it would go flipping over Central Park. But of course, right behind it, rising above all the other buildings as sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus above the Serengeti, the Sears Tower stands 1,451 feet tall. The official name is now the Willis Tower, but locals still refer to it as the Sears under penalty of torture, as we ride this boat down the river out into Lake Green Bay sucks. The two towers up on top. Now, after they built these 1,000-foot tall buildings in New York, like the Chrysler Building and the Empire State, between World War II and the Depression, nobody was really building large buildings for a while there. They decided it just wasn't cost effective after they got back to the point where they didn't need all the scrap metal for the war effort, or had the money to build buildings like that. But then in the 1970s, Fazlur Khan, the Einstein of structural engineering, came up with what is called bundled tube construction. The way he described this is like cigarettes coming out of a package at different heights. What you're seeing with the Sears is really like 9 plain black Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill rectangle buildings, but all bunched together. One of these individually would not stand up to the wind very well, but by bundling them together like this, they strengthen one another. They are stronger together. Like America. Plus the antennas up on the top there. So when this was built in the early 1970s, it was the tallest building in the world, and it held on to that record for really a pretty long time. It was still the highest occupied floor in the United States up until just about a year ago. But of course, now it's been beaten out by other things. For one thing, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. That one is 2,700 feet tall. Now, there's kind of a weird quirk in architecture rules that spires count towards the overall height of a building, antennas do not. If we counted the antennas on the Sears, it would be about 1,700 feet tall. But the Burj Khalifa is 2,700 feet. So it's like you take the Sears and the antennas, then add another 1,000 feet on top of that. This white one with the wedge chopped out is another Harry Weiss. So that is presently the tallest building in the world, has been for quite some time. But it's just a weird quirk that even if your spire just looks like a Tinker toy or something on the top, that counts, but antennas do not. Now, theoretically, the Burj Khalifa is going to be losing its record to the Jeddah Tower in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, which has been held up in construction for a really long time. It is supposed to get up to about the 3,000-foot range when it is built. More than half a mile up in the sky. And as for the highest occupied floor, like the only buildings in the United States that topped it only did so because of the spires of the top of the Sears. But finally, just this past year, the Central Park Tower topped out in New York. That one has a higher occupied floor than the Sears Tower, so we've officially lost the record there. However, the Burj Khalifa, the Jeddah Tower, and the Central Park Tower were all designed by Chicago architect Adrian Smith, so we still win. USA, USA. His office is just over to the right a little ways, and Adams Street was named after me. They finally added an apostrophe this past September, briefly, I didn't check how long it was, and I still don't know who put it there. Right ahead of us here, the old Hartford Insurance Building. Now, I mentioned that sometimes architects like to have the outside of the building reflect what goes on inside. Here, the solid stone exterior protects the fragile glass interior, the same way a Hartford insurance policy protects your fragile life. Maybe, I don't know. There's not a lot of good data about that out there. But one thing that comes up quite a bit in newer architecture, you can see reflected over in the building that is coming up next. One thing, every single executive wants to have a corner office. And usually you only get about 4 of them. Move up a little bit further here. I know 110 Whacker advertises specifically right on their webpage, 14 corner offices per floor, in case you got any whiny little crybabies among your group. But this is the old Commodities Exchange building from the 1980s, some postmodernism. Now, usually every executive wants a corner office. Officially, you would get 4 per floor in an old Mies van der Rohe style building. Here, with all of these jagged edges, it's something like 32 corner offices per floor over on the other side. That way, nobody has to feel left out. Everybody gets to be a winner. Which sounds like a great setup for a joke about millennials or Gen Z kids. But actually, it was built for baby boomers. Baby boomers tell you they can't get offended. Tell them Animal House is just okay. See how they react. Let's get underneath here a little bit. Underneath Madison, the Civic Opera Building, by 1929 by Graham Anderson Probst and White, built for a guy named Samuel Insull. There's a lot of urban legends about why it is shaped like a throne, and really the reason is just kind of practical. The 2 towers on the side were supposed to be office buildings whose rent money would keep the opera afloat. Insull had been involved in the opera for a long time. He knew that operas were not big money makers. Theaters do not often make money, which is a good time to plug next week's tour, which is going to be a theatrical history tour to benefit the Snellville Performing Arts Center. So this was a good idea, having office space that would help keep the opera afloat. Problem is they opened it November of 1929, right after the stock market crash that kicked off the Great Depression. There used to be another Graham Anderson Probst and White building right here, the General Growth Properties building, which at least had some character, which is more than you can really say for Getch Partners building here at 110 North Wacker. There's actually been chains where tour guides try to wonder, what the heck can we say about this? I will say the event space in here, I just found this picture. This is one of their event spaces. Apparently one of the events was a diarrhea convention where they served Oops All Berries cereal. I'll just let that linger there a second. Now, just on the other side of it, we'll be able to see just a little bit of 123 Wacker by Ralph Johnson, the architect, which is supposed to be a postmodern version of the Civic Opera Building. It also kind of has a vague look of a throne to it, but it's like a new for the 80s version of the Civic Opera. Made a lot of news when it was built because it was designed entirely with computers. Which even now, like Otto Stark would be like, no, you must see every inch of the building with your bare hands. This is sometimes said to be the first Starbucks in the city. I worked a shift there one time. They said they were the first Starbucks in the city. They were not the first Starbucks in the city. There may be the oldest one still there. Coming up on our right, the Great Lakes Building by Holabird and Roche, the group that preceded Holabird and Root, back before the Art Deco era. These were a couple of guys who came out of William LeBaron Jenney's office. And this one, it's amazing this hasn't been torn down yet, honestly. Generally, buildings this small right on the river would be replaced by something taller, but I love that it's stayed here. It gives us a splash of color right when we kind of need it. One more point at which we shall duck. Yeah, Animal House was just okay. There, I said it. I'm sure by the standards of the day, etc., etc. It's comedy, you had to be there. Here we've got the Nuveen Building, 333 Wacker, while we're speaking of old movies. This is where Ferris Bueller's dad works. Now, they no longer have this thing, which is like a postmodern rendition of a hammock that was there back when I filmed this. But this one tends to win a lot of popularity contests. This is some basic postmodernism. It's a very simple, elegant version of postmodernism, really. Reflects the skyline back behind it of the two colors of glass. At least one usually matches the color of the water, so there's a lot of contextualism. The octagon support beams match the octagons over at the merchandise mart across the river. But again, what we have to say on every boat tour is this is where Ferris Bueller's Dad works. Though somehow in the movie, it overlooks Dearborn Street. This building kind of echoes. This is another Perkins and Will Art Deco building, kind of echoing the look of Navy Pier. It's just about the last one where we really have to duck underneath the Wells Street Bridge here. Coming up here, we've got the old Chicago Times building by Hullabird and Root. And then just beyond that, you can see a bit of the Builders building by Burnham and Burnham, with an addition by Adrian Smith. Now, Burnham and Burnham were the sons of Daniel Burnham, who really brought back the Greek revivalism. You can see that, like the row of columns up on the top there, the colonnade of columns, where the columnated ruins domino. Now, Burnham was in charge of the World's Fair of 1893. He brought back Greek revivalism for that because he was bringing in architects from all over the place. And even though that style was kind of going out of date by 1893, it was a language that all of them spoke. So the World's Fair of 1893 brought back Greek revivalism in a big way. You still see like post offices that are in that style all over the place. Really, anytime you see a building with columns, you can just kind of assume that that is the influence of Daniel Burnham. He was also a city planner. But up there, once you start looking for them, when you wander around the city, you notice these colonnades of columns just all over the place, including at the Marshall Fields, now the Macy's on State Street. There's a colonnade of columns up on the top of that, which is one of the places we can actually trace Al Capone to. Now, you hear all over the city, Al Capone was here, Al Capone was there. It's almost never true. We know from his trial that he went to Marshall Fields to have his custom underpants made. He favored union suits, combination shirts and shorts that were made out of ladies' glove silk, which the jury thought was just hilarious in 1932. On beyond us here, you can see the Carbide and Carbon building with the green and the gold just for a second there. LaSalle Wacker building, 1930. Capone was not here, but his gang was. After he went to jail, they were operating under the leadership of Frank the Enforcer Nitti. One day in 33, the cops busted into this place, shot Frank the Enforcer Nitti up pretty good. He didn't die that day, but he did not live to a ripe old age, as very few of the gangsters did. It was not a job where you got to live a long time, but you did get to buy really nice underpants while you were here. So sometimes you just have to make a decision about what's really important. Right behind me here is 111 building, which was originally planned to be 1,000 feet tall, but then 2008 happened. Straight ahead of us, the Carbide and Carbon building. I love that one. But first, we'll take a quick look at the United building, 77 Wacker, 1990, to Stefano and Partners, Ricardo Bofill, the architect. It has kind of a postmodern take on a colonnade of columns, even a Greek-style pediment roof up at the top. Then four of the columns extend all the way down, tying the whole building together, making it endlessly classical and endlessly modern at the same time. It'll never go out of date like 55 Wacker there did. Sorry, Otto. I'm sorry, Mr. Stark. All right, we proceed. Now, here we have the Carbide and Carbon building, 1930, the Burnham brothers, the green and the gold building. I thought for the longest time that wasn't really supposed to be based on a champagne bottle. It was just one of those urban legends people tell. But then somebody sent me a page out of Daniel Burnham Jr.'s diary, and there it was. The builders did want it to be the color of an old champagne bottle. So how about that? Never thought that was going to turn out to be true. But in 1930, making somebody look like a champagne bottle was a quiet act of subversion, in fact. I mean, 1930, Prohibition was going on. Champagne wasn't legal. Not that stopped anybody anywhere. In Chicago in particular, it's been estimated that like the number of places where you could get a drink roughly tripled under Prohibition. Hard to know for sure. You know, these illegal speakeasies were not known for keeping good paperwork. You often hear that the Jewelers building here by Fred Dickelberg had a speakeasy up in the Dome. usually said to be either owned or patronized by Al Capone. And there was a club up there called the Stratosphere Club, but not until years after Al Capone was gone. So it's one of those great Chicago stories that isn't quite true, but should be true. Fred Dinkelberg is an architect who does not really get his due, I don't think. He had been hired to work with Daniel Burnham, helped him on things like the Flatiron Building. He did most of the design work. His name appears nowhere on the plaques on the Flatiron Building in New York. Moving on here a little bit, we can see the Mather Building. There were supposed to be two of those. It was going to be like twin towers, but then 1929 happened and they ran out of money for it. You can see the sign for the London House, a new addition to the London Guarantee Building coming up on the left there. London House was the name of a jazz club that was in there back in the old days. You can still go on Spotify, look up like Sarah Vaughan live after hours at the London House. I keep finding more and more albums that were recorded live at the London House, though by all accounts, the sound there wasn't great. It wasn't built to be a music venue, it was built to be an insurance office. By the architect Alfred L. Schuler, whose father Samuel took the first photograph of Abraham Lincoln with a beard. Behind us here, we can see the Gothic skyscraper known as the Tribune Building. But before we get into the Tribune Building, I want to cover just briefly, emerging behind the Wrigley Building is the Intercontinental Hotel, the old Medina Athletic Club with the Yellow Onion Dome. Now, they will tell you in the building that originally they planned the roof to be a landing pad for Zeppelins, which by all accounts is probably not really true. Probably. It never would have worked, but I do think probably every building that went up in the 20s, there was that one guy on the board who wouldn't shut up about Zeppelins. You know, in 5 years, everybody's going to be flying around in Zeppelins. It's like the one guy who won't shut up about AI nowadays. The Tribune Tower, 1924 Howells and Hoods, one of the last of the great Gothic skyscrapers, with the flying buttresses up around the top. Looks like a Disney villain castle to me. And then just beyond that, with some more flying buttresses, the NBC Tower by Adrian Smith. We call this one Echo Deco, or Art Deco Revival, or just postmodernism because it's from the 1980s. But really, it is more Art Deco than Art Deco, based roughly on the look of 30 Rock, with its streamlined verticality, its simple geometric art, the spire on top that looks like Superman ought to be flying around it. I love that one. It's my favorite Adrian Smith by far. You can see a bit of the Aon building, which initially wanted to be clad in white marble. Harry Weiss told them they were being stupid. But when they did initially have it clad in white marble from Carrara, Italy, but that white marble didn't do too well under the Chicago winters. By the end of the 1970s, it was falling off and falling all over the place. Miraculously, nobody got hurt. Now, just behind these rather bland modernist buildings is this one with the undulating wavy balconies. This is called Aqua Tower by Jeannie Gang. Lady Gaga had a place for a while there. It is an apartment building. This is, at the time it was built, it was briefly the tallest building in the world, designed primarily by a woman, Chicago architect Jeannie Gang. It didn't hold on to that record for very long, but she took it back since then. Now, this is a little bit out of date, this footage. This building has been finished by now. But if you look over on the right, this building that just keeps going up and up and up and up, 1,200 feet tall, the St. Regis Tower, also known as the Wanda Vista, by the Chicago architect Jeannie Gang. With the space up there, you can see like the top of it almost looks like it's floating. There's an empty floor there for the wind to blow through. In this case, using a liquid tune mass damper wasn't enough. The wind, when you get this close to the lake shore, was just too much. So they had to have what was called a blow-through floor. And that's been tried a few times before, like 432 Park Avenue in New York has a couple of blow-through floors. But you got to be really careful with these. You could turn the entire building into the world's largest whistle. I remember when this building was going up, I mentioned that to somebody else who lived in Lakeshore East next door, and they were like, what? All right. Over on the left, we got Centennial Fountain, built to commemorate the 100th anniversary of when they reversed the flow of the Chicago River. In the old days, we used to just plug everything into the Chicago River, all of our waste, all of our sewage. And that was also our drinking water, so we'd get to the lake and we would drink it right back up. They tried digging a tunnel that went a mile out into the lake to get cleaner water. They tried digging a tunnel that was 2 miles out to get cleaner water. But finally they decided, instead of stopping polluting the river, let's just turn the whole river backwards. So that's what they did. They dug a canal that was deeper than the lake. That started the gravity did its thing. The lake started flowing into the canal, pushed the whole river backwards. So now all of our sewage would go to St. Louis instead. Take that, red states. And just over here on the left, empty space where they were planning to build the Chicago Spire, which was going to be 2,000 feet tall. I'm just approximately drunk enough to say that it looks an awful lot like a sex toy to me. But 2008 happened, they ran out of money for that, and it's been sitting in like an empty, vacant space for the longest time. But I just drove by it today. They are actually making progress on construction on 2 buildings that will be at 430 North Lakeshore. This is what they're going to look like. So they went from a sex toy to... You know, I've had Beavis and Butthead on a lot lately the last couple of weeks. You know how it is. But that, everybody, is a virtual Chicago architectural boat ride. Just a quick look at One Bennett Place. Why they call it One Bennett Place, I have no... One Bennett Park, I have no idea. That's not the name of a street, and it wouldn't be one on the grid. But all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. That was a Chicago architectural tour boat ride. Next week, we'll be going back to a little bit more normal stuff where I just show a lot more pictures and tell stories from history. We're going to be doing strange theater tales from Chicago history. I'm still putting this together and digging them all up, but this is going to be a benefit for the Snellville Performing Arts Incorporated. This is a performance space down in Snellville, Georgia, where young people have a chance to grow, to train, to perform, and a safe space to be themselves, which is something they badly... I don't know how different it is from when I lived down there, but there was nothing like that when I lived in that town in high school. But this is a benefit. They always need donations. I won't be taking any donations myself next week. I'm going to be telling you should definitely be supporting these guys. They need it more than ever right now. So that'll be next week. Strange Tales from Chicago Theatrical History. Our first theatrical performance was in the 1830s. A guy who ate fire and did magic tricks. It only cost 50 cents to see. But, all right, and with that, everybody, we will put the Benny Goodman back on and just hang out like we always do. This will be the last time I hit you up for donations for myself over the next couple of weeks. Next week, we've got the Snellville Performing Arts Benefit Tour, and after that, I'm going to be in New York for a little bit working with school groups. Assuming that doesn't all get canceled by some executive order or something. But all right, here once again, Benny Goodman coming to you live from the College Inn at the Hotel Sherman. That was well timed. Definitely good cause. Luca, my nephew, performs there, my sister's kid. Just got cast as a dancer in Hadestown. Now, the Patreon is your best bet. We're going to be covering some really interesting stories there over the next few months. I've been looking at some pulp magazines from the 1880s, which are useless for actual research. You never want to use them as a source, but they have great illustrations, and they point you towards some Chicago stories that you wouldn't have heard about otherwise, including some of which that are really big deals. That were really big deals. No commute home, no paying to park, no worrying that you got a parking ticket coming out of here. So, you know, on average, it'll cost you about $60 to take an architectural boat tour. You can just give me like half of that, that's fine. Lisa, perfect. I gotta put that whole tour together this week. Research and everything. I mean, I know enough stories that I can put something together. And Luca is going to do a related song. So that'll be cool. Maybe I'll do my favorite Shakespeare monologue, my pocket Shakespeare monologue from Richard II. I've come from no man's speak. For God's sake, let us sit above the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. Some deposed, some sleeping killed. Some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, all murdered. For within this hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his courts. And there the antic sits. That, exactly. Yeah, 5 years, John. That's amazing. St. Crispin Day speech, yeah. Once more under the beach, my friends. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he who fights with me this day shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile.
The tune is very definitely Benny Goodman from beginning to end. It's called Capriccio Paganini, an up tune. Benny?
The gentlemen in England now abed will curse themselves they will not hear. And something, when any speaks who fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. Yeah, this is a Hard Daddy shirt, I believe. I ordered it from someplace online. It's Skeletor, yeah. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, some good new music is coming out today, I believe. New Counting Crows song, that's a rarity. It's gonna be, whose album is out tonight? Yeah, the Patterson Hood album is out tonight. One of the singles is called The Pool House, and I played it over and over. Great flute solo. Great lyrics. He's the guy from Drive-By Truckers. But that is out tonight. New single from Samia. I've been just listening to Speak Like a Child, Herbie Hancock all day. This album, man, if you have not heard this album, this is just gorgeous. A gorgeous album. It's got a flugelhorn on it. Good night, Jeannie. I gotta patch up this juggling ball. Yeah, big seam leaking out little pebbles that are packing it. It's only like 30 years old. And hold their manhood cheap when any speaks who fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. No, late these days I feel more like telling sad stories of the death of kings. As if this flesh were brass impregnable.
I would like to bring Tommy Taylor.
Thanks for those of you pumping in the donations tonight.
Popular ballad title, Simply Anything.
Well, it's no secret I don't get as many donations now as I did in the pandemic. We keep these going anyway. Great. The Patreon keeps me eating anyway. I don't know what's going to happen with the school groups. How many of them might lose all their funding and everything.
To do it, moonlight.
Death of Kings, Christine.
Makes me dream of nights with you. Anything to do it, starlight.
Yeah, once again,
And my head goes reeling through the blue. Oh, my dear, I've made my mind
next
up.
week.
You and I will wind
Special benefit
up
for the Snellville Performing Arts Center down in Georgia. Lifeline for kids down there.
After anything to do with stardust must begin and end with you.
Well, Pat, it shouldn't be, but then again, there's also, I do a lot of tours for Upward Bound and Trio, which are federal grant programs. Revenant, you helped me too. For within this hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court. There the antic sits, grinning at his pomp, mocking his state, allowing him a little kingdom to monarchize, as if this flesh were brass impregnable. Then at the end bore us through the wall with a little pin and goodbye, king.
Oh, my dear, I've made my mind up. You and I will wind up.
This is Benny coming to you from the College Inn at the Sherman House Hotel, a venerable Chicago institution, now long since gone.
To do with stardust must begin and end.
Octavio, yes, I remember Fisto. And of course I remember Stinkor. Only He-Man could have gotten away with an action figure whose characteristic was that he smelled bad. And actually came with it was like patchouli oil, I
I will write out
guess.
this broadcast this evening with a swell Benny Goodman arrangement of Smooth One.
Sure, it was an infomercial, but I sure watched it. And I bought the products it advertised. Can't believe this thing still works. Got this at the Kmart on Hickman across from the Richmond Gorman. Just had a long dream about the Richmond Gorman. I went into the Richmond Gorman, and it was like this mid-century doctor's office, but I knew that somewhere behind the wall was the play area with the fiberglass elephant. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Cal. Just didn't know I missed the Jeopardy. I gotta use some duct tape for this juggling ball. I believe this scene only lasted 30 years. Things just aren't built to last anymore. Thanks, Pat. Oh, Octavio, I had some underoos. I most definitely had some of those. Let's rewind the Benny. We'll still keep hanging out here. The new albums aren't out for another 2 hours yet.
There, ladies and gentlemen, you had a Benny Goodman concerto called Clarinet a la King, and now we'd like to bring to our microphone lovely Helen Forrest, who sings a smoothie called Soft as Spring.
Yeah, who needs a fidget spinner when I got juggling balls that I can do halfway competently? Trouble is, you miss one throw, you never know where the ball goes. I only know where 2 of these ones are. There's a third around here someplace. It's bright orange, you'd think I could find it. I cannot find it. Now they're like different weights. Everybody has to put in a donation if I get it under the leg, right? That's the rule. You're all off the hook. I'll just keep drinking my peanut butter old-fashioned. This is all new Benny Goodman for me. I thought I would mix it up a little bit, find ourselves some new old Chicago live radio shows. The cats definitely know where it is. Speaking of, Priya. Play something to do?
Are like your song. They are heaven on earth.
She'll occasionally get up to chase the red dot,
A sudden need,
but more often she'd rather just kind of sit there.
a sudden need to love.
Ready to shop for juggling balls? I don't know. I got these ones from Grandma D in '94. Oh, this one's really leaking. Must find duct tape. Pretty sure I got some duct tape. This one has already been effectively duct taped, as you can see. The others I just ordered online. But no, there's like any magic store will probably have juggling balls and juggling accessories. Lately, there have been a couple of intersections near me where there are guys juggling bowling pins while you wait on traffic for tips. No, we're not doing juggling in Mysteriacon Lane. I'm not that good. It's just something to keep my hands busy while I watch television or chat online. I've just had Beavis and Butthead on a continuous loop lately. Good night, Karen. See some of you for Find a Grave Friday tomorrow, yes. Once again, I'll have to remember to bring the broom. But
Coast to coast, the national
we'll probably have to do Graceland just because it helps when there's snow on the ground if I go to one that I know I'll be able to pinpoint the location without too much trouble.
Now in the Latin manner, Helen Forrest sings Perfidia.
Drunken Shakespeare juggling in Mysteriacon, that we could do. God's sakes, let us sit above the ground and tell sad stories of the death of kings. Some deposed, some sleeping killed, some haunted by the ghosts they have deposed, some poisoned by their wives, all murdered. For within this hollow crown that rounds the mortal temples of a king keeps death his court, and there the antic sits, grinning to his... it's probably got about half of that right anyway. I'm not really an actor myself. But I feel you ought to have a couple of Shakespeare monologues in your back pocket. Lately I saw, well, it was years ago now, but I saw a flyer on the ground advertising escort services, but it called them actresses. Like, yeah, baby, I want 2 monologues. One contemporary, one Shakespeare. I go, now I can act a little when called upon to do so. It's a similar skill set to what I do. There are times when doing talking head work on TV shows is really basically just an acting gig. They've got all your lines written out for you. Yeah, if I drop the ball and you guys drink, you're going to be drinking a lot. Well, I don't know, have you seen that person I've seen on Reels, the history gossip? This young British woman who keeps calling pooping bum chunder? She's very funny. Yeah, I know who we're finding for Find a Grave Friday tomorrow for once. Somebody who will be coming up on the Patreon in the next couple of months has come up a little bit on the virtual tours this week. And the morning mini tours. Yeah, Megan, these things can go south in a real hurry. But, you know, you just have to have the right persona for some things, and I'm not the kind of person who can talk about how Victoria had a lamppost with the result of bum chunder, and then hug one and say, thanks, love, and get away with it.
There's a little riot tune that's very definitely Benny Goodman from beginning to end. It's
a
called
shame.
Capriccio Paganini, an up tune. Benny?
New Samia song is called Lizard. I believe the new Counting Crows will be called Tulsa Spaceman. Patterson Hood has this line about this fish smelled blood and the shit was stirred just into the turd with the dream deferred. That's a bum chunder of a lyric right there. Mallrat has a new album out, though none of the songs quite grab me like Butterfly Blue on the last one. New Gaga's a couple of weeks out. New Samia next month, I think. It's been there's a lot of good stuff to listen to. I just started listening to Sizzle. She was terrific. And Barty's Strange has a new album out that's really good called Horror. There we go. Chunder Marina with a D. I've had a lot to drink tonight. I really have. I feel like I'm about to start chasing the red laser beam myself. Lane, yeah. Knew a guy who was in a football accident back in school. Never wanted to play football after that. It was over Christmas break too, so a lot of jokes about whether he got to see the ball drop on the TV for New Year's. Priya just watched that light. If we're ever invaded by red lights, Martin and I have not seen that. I did not know SZA had a movie. Yeah, goat balls. You can always just get some goat balls. It apparently worked a little too well for Harry McCormick.
I would like to bring Tommy Taylor back to the microphone to put the
I'm surprised that dude on television hasn't tried that yet. Rumor has it, you know, that he's tried similar operations. Second-hand source citing his wife, whose record I got over here. It was a really good record. But all right, everybody. All this talk of bum chunder has made me need to wrap this up. So thank you very much for joining me. Once again, remember, we'll be keeping, since we're working for a youth theater group, we'll be keeping these a little bit more PG-13 at least. Next week for Strange Theatrical Tales from Chicago history. We're talking John Wilkes Booth. We're talking Edwin Booth. We're talking Charlotte Cushman, one of the first women to play Hamlet. But all right, everybody. Hymns R.O. I don't know, Octavio. Mine's kind of hung up in a regional distribution center in Phoenix right now. But all right. Thanks for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, incredibly vain and slightly drunk. Telling you all to tune in next week for Strange Theater Tales for the benefit of Snellville Performing Arts. Once again, this is a town where they used to chase me around with knives because I had curly hair. That any American man who had curly hair ought to get a buzz cut. That meant he was gay. I think it's the town's a little different now. But at the same time, you know what I mean. So, all right, thanks everybody for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. Until we meet again, stay safe.